It is the summer of 1964. London wakes beneath grey skies as red double-decker buses rumble through crowded streets. The city is alive with possibility. Coffee bars are packed with young musicians as dreaming of fame. Transistor radios pour out the latest pop songs, and one band dominates every newspaper, every television screen, and every conversation. The Beatles are no longer just Britain's biggest group. They are becoming a global phenomenon. Just a few miles away, however, another drummer begins his day like countless others. His name is Jimmie Nichol. He is not rich, he is not famous. He is simply one of London's many hard-working session musicians, earning enough money to pay the bills by playing wherever someone needs a reliable drummer. If you were to pass him in the street this morning, you probably wouldn't look twice. Within 24 hours, millions of people around the world will know his face. It all begins with a telephone call. Jimmie is enjoying a quiet afternoon at home after lunch when the phone suddenly rings. On the other end of the line is an unexpected voice. It belongs to George Martin, the producer behind the Beatles' extraordinary success. There is no time for small talk. Can you get to Abbey Road Studios immediately? Ringo Starr has fallen ill. The Beatles are due to leave for a world tour in less than a day. Thousands of fans are already waiting in Denmark, the Netherlands, Hong Kong, Australia, and New Zealand. Cancelling the tour would be disastrous. Someone has to sit behind Ringo's famous drum kit. George Martin believes Jimmie Nichol is the man who can do it. For Jimmie, it feels almost unreal. Only days earlier, he has been recording budget cover versions of Beatles songs for cheap records sold in high street shops. Now he is being asked to play those same songs with the real Beatles themselves. He grabs his drumsticks, leaves the house, and heads for Abbey Road. He has no idea that he is about to step into the biggest storm popular music has ever seen. The journey across London feels different today. The familiar streets blur past the taxi window, but his mind is elsewhere. Questions race through his head. Is this really happening? Can he learn an entire Beatles concert in a single afternoon? More importantly, will John Lennon, Paul McCartney and George Harrison even accept him? Outside Abbey Road Studios, there are no crowds waiting. The famous gatherings of fans have not yet become a daily sight. Instead, the building appears strangely ordinary. Engineers arrive carrying equipment. Delivery vans pull up at the entrance. If you didn't know better, you would never guess that some of the most famous music in the world is being created behind these brick walls. Jimmie steps through the front door and is greeted by a tense atmosphere. Usually, Abbey Road is a place of careful planning and patient recording sessions. Today, it feels more like an emergency headquarters. The Beatles are due to leave Britain in less than 24 hours. Flights have been booked. Hotels are reserved. Concert halls across Europe, Asia and Australia are sold out. Thousands of fans are already waiting. There is no time to waste. Waiting inside is George Martin. Calm as ever, he greets Jimmie with a reassuring smile. But even Britain's most respected record producer cannot hide the urgency of the situation. Then comes the moment Jimmie has hardly dared imagine. He walks into Studio 2. Standing only a few feet away are the four men whose faces fill newspapers around the world. John Lennon looks up first, his sharp eyes studying the stranger who might save their tour. Paul McCartney is the first to break the tension, offering a warm smile and a handshake. George Harrison is quieter. He has already made it clear that he doesn't like the idea of replacing Ringo Starr, even temporarily. Only after long discussions with Brian Epstein and George Martin has he reluctantly agreed to continue the tour. No one wants to replace Ringo, but everyone knows there is no other choice. There are no lengthy introductions, no photographs, no celebration. Someone counts in the first song. Jimmie climbs behind Ringo's famous Ludwig drum kit, adjusts the stool, grips his sticks, and takes a deep breath. In just a few hours, he must become a Beatle. The rehearsal begins immediately. There are no second chances, no luxury of spending days learning the set. Every minute counts. George Martin calls out the songs one after another. I want to hold your hand. She loves you. All my loving. Can't buy me love. To Jimmie's relief, the music isn't unfamiliar. Only weeks earlier, he has been recording Beatles cover versions for budget records sold in British shops. He already knows the rhythms, the fills, and the endings. It is one of the reasons George Martin has chosen him. Out of all the drummers in London, Jimmie is one of the few who can step into the role with almost no preparation. Even so, playing the songs is one thing. Playing them with the Beatles is something entirely different. The room is filled with nervous energy. John Lennon cracks the occasional joke, trying to ease the tension, while Paul McCartney offers quiet words of encouragement between songs. George Harrison remains focused. His thoughts are never far from Ringo, who is lying in a London hospital with acute tonsillitis, wondering if his friends can manage without him. Jimmie concentrates on one thing alone, keeping perfect time. Every beat matters. Every fill has to sound like Ringo's. He isn't being asked to play like Jimmie Nichol. He's being asked to disappear behind the drums and become someone else. As the afternoon wears on, the tension slowly begins to lift. Song after song falls into place. George Martin nods with approval. Brian Epstein allows himself a small smile. It might just work. There is barely enough time for Jimmie to catch his breath before another surprise awaits him. A tailor is called in to alter one of Ringo Starr's stage suits so that it fits its temporary owner. A hairdresser trims Jimmie's hair into the now famous Beatles style. Looking into the mirror, he hardly recognises the man staring back. Only this morning, he is an anonymous session musician. Tonight, he looks like a Beatle. Outside, fans have no idea that history is quietly unfolding inside Abbey Road Studios. They still believe they will be seeing the Fab Four exactly as they know them. Only a handful of people know the truth. Tomorrow, Jimmie Nichol will walk onto a stage in Copenhagen in front of thousands of screaming fans. He has less than 24 hours to prepare for the biggest performance of his life. The morning of June the 4th, 1964, dawns grey over London as a passenger aircraft climbs steadily into the sky, banking east towards Denmark. On board are 4 young men dressed in matching dark suits. 3 of them are already among the most recognisable faces on the planet. The 4th sits quietly beside the window. The previous day has passed in a blur. A frantic rehearsal at Abbey Road. A borrowed stage suit, altered overnight. A fresh Beatle haircut, handshakes, smiles, encouraging words. There has been barely enough time to stop and think. Now there is only the steady hum of the engines. Below them, England slowly disappears beneath a blanket of cloud. Ahead lies Copenhagen, the first stop on a world tour that promises to be unlike anything popular music has ever seen. As the aircraft begins its descent, Jimmie presses his face closer to the window. Something isn't right. The airport is surrounded. Tiny figures crowd the roads leading to the terminal. Police vehicles are parked everywhere. Barriers struggle to contain a sea of excited fans who have gathered hours before the Beatles are due to arrive. Even from thousands of feet in the air, the excitement is impossible to miss. The wheels touch the runway. The aircraft slows to a stop. Almost immediately the sound begins. Even through the metal body of the plane, the screaming is unmistakable. The cabin door swings open and the Beatles step out into complete chaos. Flashbulbs explode like lightning. Reporters shout over one another. Police officers lock arms, desperately trying to force a path through the crush of people. Hundreds of hands reach over barriers, hoping to touch a sleeve, a shoulder, anything. Jimmie follows only a few steps behind John, Paul and George. For a moment he almost forgets that these screams are meant for someone else. Yesterday, hardly anyone knew who he was. Today, strangers scream simply because he looks like a Beatle. The journey from the airport to the city is painfully slow. Fans chase the cars through the streets. Every traffic light becomes another opportunity for crowds to gather around the motorcade. Police motorcycles clear a route ahead, while people wave from rooftops and lean from windows, hoping for a glimpse. It feels less like arriving for a concert and more like visiting another world. There is little time to settle into the hotel before the band is on the move again. Their destination is the KB Hallen Arena. Inside, technicians hurry across the stage, checking microphones and amplifiers one final time. The smell of warm electrical equipment mixes with fresh paint and polished wood. Road managers glance repeatedly at their watches. Beyond the heavy curtains, thousands of impatient voices merge into one deafening roar. Backstage, the mood is strangely calm. John quietly tunes his guitar. George checks the strings on his Gretsch one last time. Paul paces the floor, his Hofner bass slung over his shoulder. Jimmie sits alone behind a practice pad, gently tapping out familiar rhythms with his drumsticks. Left, right, left, right. Not because he has forgotten the songs, because it keeps his hands steady. A stage manager appears at the doorway. 5 minutes. No one says very much. There is nothing left to say. The roar beyond the curtain grows louder. Then, it's time. The 4 men walk towards the stage. As Jimmie climbs the steps behind the others, the sound is almost overwhelming. More than 4,000 fans leap to their feet as the Beatles emerge beneath the bright white lights. The screaming is so loud it becomes a physical force, washing across the stage like a wave. Jimmie settles onto the drum stool. He adjusts the height, places his feet on the pedals, wraps his fingers tightly around the drumsticks. Across the stage, Paul turns and catches his eye. A small nod. For the briefest heartbeat, time stands still. Then the drums explode into life. She Loves You crashes through the arena. The audience never notices the tiny hesitation. The fear disappears with the first beat. For the next 30 minutes, Jimmie Nichol is no longer standing in for Ringo Starr. To every screaming fan inside the KB Hallen, he is a Beatle. The final chord echoes around Copenhagen's KB Hallen as the 4 musicians hurry from the stage. Behind them, the screams continue without pause. Fans pound against barriers, hoping for one last glimpse. Security officers quickly surround the band, ushering them down a narrow corridor and into the safety of their dressing room. Only then does Jimmie allow himself to breathe. He has done it. His first concert with the Beatles is over. Paul McCartney breaks the silence with a grin. "Well done," he says, giving Jimmie a reassuring pat on the shoulder. John Lennon follows with one of his trademark wisecracks, drawing laughter from everyone in the room. Even George Harrison, who only a day earlier had struggled with the idea of touring without Ringo Starr, seems more relaxed. The impossible has become reality. Jimmie Nichol has passed the biggest audition of his life. There is little time to celebrate. Outside, thousands of fans are still waiting. Police form a protective ring around the Beatles as they are rushed back to their hotel. Even there, the noise follows them. Crowds gather beneath the windows, singing Beatles songs long into the night. Every curtain that moves sparks another eruption of screams. For Jimmie, it all feels like stepping into another universe. The following morning, the journey continues. Suitcases are packed before sunrise. Cars race to airports under police escort. Every destination brings the same astonishing scenes. Crowds wait for hours just to watch the Beatles walk from an aeroplane to a waiting limousine. Newspapers publish photographs almost before the band has left the airport. Wherever they arrive, Beatlemania arrives first. In Amsterdam, the excitement reaches another level. The narrow streets beside the canals are packed with fans. Hotel balconies disappear beneath waving hands and homemade banners. Boats drift through the canals, carrying people hoping for a better view of the world's most famous band. Jimmie can scarcely believe what he is seeing. Only a few days earlier, he is travelling through London unnoticed. Now strangers burst into tears at the sight of him. Young women push through crowds, just to touch his jacket or ask for an autograph. Years later, Jimmie remembers the experience with a mixture of amusement and disbelief. "The day before I was a Beatle," he recalls, "girls weren't interested in me at all. The day after, with the suit and the Beatle haircut, they were dying to touch me. It is thrilling, it is bewildering, and at times more than a little frightening." Yet Jimmie soon discovers something unexpected. Unlike John, Paul and George, he can still slip away unnoticed. While the others remain prisoners inside hotels, surrounded by security and screaming fans, Jimmie quietly walks the streets alone. In Hong Kong, he wanders through the bustling harbour, watching families who live aboard tiny wooden boats. He explores the crowded streets of Kowloon, visits local clubs and simply observes everyday life. Later, he reflects on those rare moments of freedom. "I like to see life," he says. "A Beatle could never really do that." It is a strange position to occupy. He is famous enough to perform before thousands every night, yet anonymous enough to disappear into the crowd the following morning. The Beatles themselves seem to accept him as one of their own. Long hours spent travelling by plane, bus and car are filled with jokes, stories and endless cups of tea. Between concerts, the band laugh together, tease one another and try to ignore the madness unfolding outside. For a brief moment in time, Jimmie is living the dream that countless musicians can only imagine. But dreams have a habit of ending. As the tour moves steadily south towards Australia, whispers begin to spread through the travelling party. Ringo Starr is recovering. Each day brings encouraging news from London. His fever has broken. His strength is returning. Soon he will be well enough to travel. Nobody mentions what that means for Jimmie. Nobody needs to. Every concert brings him one step closer to the end of his extraordinary adventure. Somewhere high above the Indian Ocean, another aircraft is making its way towards Australia. On board is a familiar face. Ringo Starr is coming back. And for Jimmie Nichol, the clock has begun to run out. For Jimmie Nichol, the countdown is over. When the two men finally meet in Melbourne, there is no awkwardness, no rivalry, no resentment. Ringo is pleased to be back with his band, and Jimmie is pleased to see him recovered. From the very beginning, he has understood that this moment would come. His job has never been to replace Ringo Starr. His job has simply been to make sure the Beatles never miss a beat. That evening, Jimmie steps behind the drum kit one last time. The audience has no idea they are witnessing the final performance of the man who has quietly carried the world's biggest band through one of the most important tours in its history. The music ends. The applause fades. Almost as quickly as it began, his extraordinary adventure is over. Before dawn the following morning, while the Beatles are still asleep, Jimmie quietly packs his suitcase. There are no emotional speeches, no photographers waiting in the lobby, no farewell concert. Brian Epstein meets him before he leaves for the airport. In his hand is a cheque for £500, a generous payment for 12 unforgettable days. He also presents Jimmie with a gold Eternamatic wristwatch, engraved with a simple message from the Beatles and Brian Epstein, thanking him for stepping in when they needed him most. It is a small gesture, but one Jimmie treasures for the rest of his life. As his plane lifts away from Melbourne, he looks down through the window. Only 12 days earlier, he has climbed aboard a flight as an unknown session drummer. Now he leaves carrying one of the most extraordinary stories in the history of popular music. Back in Britain, reality arrives quickly. Jimmie reforms his own band, hoping that the world's sudden fascination with the temporary Beatle might open new doors. For a while it seems possible. Crowds are curious, promoters make inquiries, but Beatlemania moves at a relentless pace, and the world's attention soon settles once again on John, Paul, George and Ringo. The singles fail to become hits. The offers begin to dry up. Within a year, Jimmie is declared bankrupt. It is a painful reminder that 15 minutes of fame can disappear just as quickly as it arrives. Yet those who know him never question his ability. Paul McCartney quietly recommends him for touring work with Peter and Gordon, believing he deserves another opportunity. Later, Jimmie joins the successful Swedish group the Spotniks, tours internationally once more, spends several years living and performing in Mexico, writes music for film, and eventually returns to England, where he leaves professional music behind for an altogether different life. As the years pass, something unusual happens. The man who briefly became one of the most famous faces on earth simply disappears. He rarely gives interviews. He refuses to exploit his connection with the Beatles. While countless books, documentaries, and television programs revisit Beatlemania, Jimmie chooses silence. Perhaps he understands that those remarkable 12 days belong as much to history as they do to him. George Martin never forgets the drummer who answered the call. He praises Jimmie for learning Ringo's parts almost overnight and performing them flawlessly under extraordinary pressure. Paul McCartney later admits that very few musicians could have done what Jimmie did, and perhaps that is how he deserves to be remembered. Not as the man who replaced Ringo Starr, but as the man who ensured that, at the height of Beatlemania, the biggest band in the world never had to cancel a single performance. For 12 remarkable days in the summer of 1964, Jimmie Nichol carried an impossible responsibility with quiet professionalism and remarkable skill. He never asked to become famous. He simply answered the telephone, picked up his drumsticks, and did the job. Then, as quietly as he had entered the story, he walked away from it. And somewhere in Beatles history, behind the roar of the crowds and the flash of the cameras, the steady beat of Jimmie Nichol can still be heard.